Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. I'm Leonardo Nieto, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar. We are here to explore beyond the logo, crafting place identities, an insightful journey into how places can communicate their essence beyond simple visuals. We are honored to have Dr. Natasha Grand Norman, Director of the Institute for Identity, with us. Dr. Grant is an expert who has been instrumental in redefining place branding by delving into the cultural and psychological layers that define a location's identity. Today's, Today, Dr. Grant will share her insights on the evolution of place branding in Europe and how emerging destination can strategically use this powerful tool. Joining the discussion are esteemed place branders Juan Fernando Rubio, Leon Trujillo, Juan Jose Posada, and myself. We will engage with Dr. Grant in a dynamic conversation, posing questions and discussing the complexities and triumphs of building compelling place identities. This webinar aims to provide you with practical insights and innovative perspectives on developing strong sense of place through effective branding strategies. We hope to inspire you with new ideas and approaches that you can apply to your projects. Thank you for joining us. Let us dive in the fascinating world of place branding. Well, Natasha, first of all, thank you very much to be with us today. How are you?
And thank you for your kind introduction, Leonardo. If you, I can go straight into the answer. Would you like to repeat the question?
Yeah, of course. Let me repeat the question. So I am saying that we want to know that in a globalized world, many destinations compete for attention. So how can a place distinguish itself through an effective use of place branding?
Well, there are two aspects to place promotion, or when people think about promoting places, there's place branding and place marketing. And place branding is what we say about the place, and marketing is how we promote it. So here we are place branders. We're here discussing what do we need to say about the place that would make it stand out. And in our experience, I think we discovered a small paradox, which is this. If you have relatively small ambitions, or the target audience that is quite close, you can go with fairly general content, and you can link yourself up to infrastructure. And we know most examples and most place brands, when we think about them, are like this. Very classical one is, the beach destination. You talk about the beach. Or there are places which talk about mountain and skiing. It's simply, letting know people, how you can enjoy the place. And this is a large number of place branding projects are limited to this. However, and this is where it gets interesting, that when you want to go global and give your place a universal international recognition, the bigger your ambition, the less general you have to be, the more specific you have to be, and the more precise you have to be. For example, because if you want to be, if you like, get a Michelin star, you need to show some personality. You cannot be just a nice guy. So similarly, when we think about Switzerland, for example, which does have quite a good global recognition, reputation, and a certain consistent image, it has to do with secure future. Their brand values are secure future and innovation. And we think about precision, things running on time, good quality, everything related to that. So we need to give people something to remember and some image that will stick in their head. And that image, ideally, what we're trying to create, we want it to be as clear as possible, not something fuzzy. And we also want it to be consistent. So whenever people think about you in Africa, in Australia, in America, they get a pretty similar image or feel or premonition of experience. You know, we say London, and I think across the world, something that would pop into the mind will be fairly consistent. I want to add one more thing, that abstract, if you like, personality, image, call it whatever you like, has to be fairly nebulous, and if you like, non-material, because I think a lot of people understand, yes, we can't link up to infrastructure, but it can't be even, I don't know, a game, because, for example, people say Brazil football, at least, that's how you associate it from Europe. But football itself can tell us, I don't know, that people are healthy and they probably are very fit and have good bodies in Brazil, which is probably all true, but it won't explain to us manufacturing or innovation that is taking place in the country. So this is an example of how you really need to go higher and to more abstract levels to promote something at the same time very precise. Let me give you another example. Again, when you talk about Britain, you can have lots of things may come to mind, but it all comes down to rationality. Things are done within reason. They're done according to structure, to rules, and that underpins everything that you can experience in Britain, the British products that you may buy, and so on and so forth. So the smaller the place, the more general you can afford to be, and the more material you can be. But the bigger the place, the more ambitious the place, the more specific, and at the same time abstract you need to be, in our view.
Okay, thank you very much, Juan. You are unmute, please. Follow with your question, please.
Thank you, Natasha. Sorry for the small detail of the sound. What are the fundamentals, elements that compose a place identity, and how should they articulate in a destination narrative?
What I talked about before, about this being specific and putting up a clear image of yourself, we call it, for the ease of communication, we call it either place personality, and we also talk about place identity. We understand place identity is how the place makes people behave. So, and what way of life it produces and reinforces, because ultimately that's what we want to package and give to the world. If we talk about elements of it, yes, some of it can be physical, so physical reminders of the place, which may have to do with the landscape, for example. Then there are cultural symbols, the products of people here, for example, architecture, I don't know, Eiffel Tower in Paris, 100 Years of Solitude, it can be a book. It's the things that make us who we are in this place. Then there is self-perception, and that's a very interesting category, because people in most places would, if you ask them what are you like, what are Colombians like, what are Argentinians like, what are French like, they will tell you something. They will know, and they would say, we're friendly, we're creative, we're crazy. A very interesting observation is that the people actually normally diametrally opposite to what they say they are, because they tend to say what is the hardest for them to be.
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen that introvert nations would say that they're very friendly, or creative people would often say that they're very organized and businesslike, because that's what they notice about themselves. But it's really useful to know how people see themselves. But ultimately, if we want to understand the place and place identity, you want to understand people's values and rules of life. And it's because we believe that in every place, due to its climate, geography, history, um, outlay of the land, there's, if you like, the optimal, the best way to be. You know, somewhere people really have to cooperate because maybe the climate is harsh, and um, and you can't survive on your own, and you tend to get more team working people in such places, whereas somewhere else where perhaps the land is very generous and growing harvests are easy, the people tend to be more individualistic. And I know this is a very gross generalization, and we don't live in agricultural societies anymore, but you have the remnants of it in the mentality. You know, you could look at the fences. It's another one of the things I always look at when you come to a place. Look at how tall the fences are. And sometimes there are no fences at all. And sometimes they're immensely tall metal with gates. And it tells you about how people see each other and how they cooperate with their neighbors or otherwise. So we'll look at this, how people learned to live there. So do they cooperate? How do they see success? This is a very interesting question, which always tells you very, very much about the society. You know, what is an achievement? Is it building a business and making lots of money? Is it becoming a professor at university? Is it being a doctor? Is it actually being very humble and never showing anything but giving away to the others? And again, understanding success, money, family. So if you talk about these things, you get a key to seeing how people have chosen to live here. And that's this interesting layer that connects people living in the place. One of the big challenges very often when you talk about place branding, people would say, but we've got everything. We've got crazy people, we've got creatives, we've got entrepreneurs, we've got doctors, and of course there's racial, religious, ethnic minorities, right? And I think a big mistake is to try and, list them all and tick them all. And I call it the Hillary Clinton speech, not out of any disrespect, but, we knew that in her election, she had to mention every donor and every society and every group that supported her, but it made for a very boring speech. So instead of trying to explain everything that we've got, let's show the difference. We think you should show the commonality. And the commonality is how we live here. And so for us, these values and ways of life is the core element of place identity. And the second part of your question is about how we articulate it. And I think Leonardo will help me here. I'll show you one of our deliverables, which is you create a very clear expression of place identity, boil it down to those abstract things that are so hard to explain. And will you be able to share?
Yeah, which one? It's the Australia?
The South Australia one, please. Yes. So we've done some research in South Australia recently, and we've figured out that what people really care about most is being part of a group. They all know each other. They're very collectivist people, and belonging is essential for them. Commitment, they work very honestly, and they don't need to be checked. It's almost as if they themselves are the best, like they're themselves their best critics. So, and they're also living not to be successful in terms of money, but to be successful in terms of making a lasting impact, which has to do with, which explains why there's so much pioneering work to do with sustainability, engineering, teamwork, and so on. So we have these 3 values, and then we describe their character. It's about how things are done there. And there are people, I won't go into the detail, but what I wanted to show that if you have this little model in mind, and it's everywhere, it's with tourism promotion, talent attraction, investment attraction, student attraction, this is their common hymn sheet. They all work with different creative agencies. They all have their own campaigns, but they have agreed that this is the image that we're going to build. And whatever creative output and comms output we have, it has to tick these boxes. It has to talk about these values and appear in this character. So we think if you have a very simple and precise tool on which everybody agrees, that helps. And that's how you articulate place identity. And then you give it to the marketing people and they do their magic with it.
Okay, so thank you. Would you mind describing that process that you follow to discover and to construct those narratives to resonate in the narrative? How do you
Yes,
you have shown it right now, but maybe
yes.
for our audience, it should be great to really understand your process.
You know, we hear a lot about involving stakeholders and engaging the locals, which is always a big, we all understand it needs to be done, but people do it differently. And
Okay.
I think it's usually done through focus groups, and which is a valid method if you want to work with it. If we talk about our method, we find one-to-one interviews most useful. So on a typical location, we would talk to at least 35, but sometimes over 100 people. Obviously, as diverse as possible, you know, starting with, you know, the top officials, premiers, heads of governments, politicians, because you know, they're part of the process. They need to be engaged, but going down to always business owners, community leaders, creatives. You know, in every location they're different, and that itself is a different, interesting process to try and find out the real, if you like, crystals, the people who express the place, who live the place, and who others look up to, or who make things happen here. You know, there's lots of passive citizens, and we're very passive, most of us, most of the time, but sometimes we create something. We start a group, we go to events, and the challenge is to find these people. And when we talk to them, we don't just talk about why you love your place, because it is normal and common, and most people want to love where they grew up, and they would talk about, you know, the location and how they enjoy looking at the sunset. But what we really want to get out of that is not this, but their lives. Why do you do what you do? Why did you choose your profession? Why, you know, what do you hope for your children? What books do you read to your children, especially when they're small? And again, what is success? You know, what is a good family? What you would never do if somebody moved here and they were a good friend of yours. What would you advise them to do and never to do? And what is your best wish for your place? And throughout these conversations, that's when we unravel the commonalities. That's when we unravel those rules of life, as you say. That, of course, that is complemented by, you know, studying the cultural output of the place, studying the socioeconomic data, studying, you know, different things are available. I think in one place we came across this data on the distribution of main health problems or diseases. So, you know, whether it's a stroke, a heart attack, or, you know, it also tells you, you know, whatever is prevalent, that could also be a clue to what's happening. So it's a very exploratory, anthropological, if you like, approach. We don't come with a questionnaire and a tick box. It's very open-ended, is you like, unstructured, but for us, it really allows us to get under the skin. And there are of the place in the society. And in terms of engagement, there are other interesting tools in which you can invite all the local creatives, especially graphic designers or designers, because they're usually people who they feel it's their job and they feel very sensitive about it. So it's good to interact with them, explain what you're doing, welcome their input. And so we have this kind of open town halls, if you like, or creative councils, or you can call it whatever you like. But if you like, curating groups that meet throughout the project, at the beginning, at the middle, at the end, discussing it and being on board and understanding what's going on. Because as a consultant, the worst thing you can do is get a job, do something quietly, and then come up and say, this is it, this will make you happy and successful. And everybody would say, but why? You know, so the task and the challenge is, first of all, to come up with something that people would say, yes, you know, we've always known this, but we couldn't quite formulate it like this, define it ourselves. So for me, that is the biggest quality indicator. And when it resonates, or if they say, what you tell about us gives me goosebumps. So that's a good start. It means people, this will live and people will take it forward.
Well, my last question will be answered after my partners talk to you, because what's the essence of a place? But for the just for the last question.
Okay. So I think Juanjo have a question. This is very useful for the conversation too.
Okay, so I would like to ask, from your experience, how has the concept of practice of play branding evolved in Europe over the recent years? And also, what are some of the most significant challenges that places in Europe face today in trying to establish a strong place brand?
Thank you. I think, you know, we're generalizing about Europe here, because there are different parts of Europe, I think, are moving with different speed. But I think it has generally moved from, you know, logo conversations maybe 30 years ago to value conversations. As in, so it's coming, you know, it all started with logos, infrastructure, and it's coming back to who we are, what holds us together. So it becomes a very introspective process. It's less about promoting and marketing, but more about understanding ourselves, because we need to have some peace and some agreement between us. And I think this is very important politically, because I think the politicians stopped having this conversation. And now it's civil servants and place branders and consultants who try and unravel and bring together these uniting common values. It was interesting that, you know, I Love Amsterdam was one of the perhaps first or most well-known place brands that came out of Europe. And Geerte Ude, who has been head of the agency in charge of promoting Amsterdam for about 20 years, she was speaking at the Nordics conference last year, and she said, my two main problems are identity, values. Again, so 20 years on, they're still discussing, and they can't discuss what unites us, what we're the community. And the second one is data. It's basically how we incorporate data, what do we use with data, how we incorporate AI. And it's all about, you know, how can it help us understand. I believe that's more to do with marketing, understanding audiences, understanding what messages work or don't. Another big theme here, but also globally, is sustainability. And how do you prove sustainability credentials? I, however, think that it's more of a, you know, it's the same criteria like safety. You know, it doesn't differentiate you, it doesn't, but you just have to be safe. So now as well, before you start the conversation, you have to be sustainable, which is a good idea. Coming back to data, though, there is I think there's a question and challenge of making sense of all the data that people now have, because there's so much on practically everything. And so you can even take a place, we were discussing it with somebody in Scotland the other day, that they have so much about, who their potential target groups are, what are they interested, but they can't, they need to bring it together. It's still just lots of piles, and how do you integrate this? And finally, and I think that might be, again, talking with colleagues, it might be not a Europe specific problem, but it's about having a unified place proposition, a unified value proposition. I know it's a problem in America, in North America, in Australia. There's so many facets to a place brand now. It's not just about tourism. It's not just about investment attraction. In Europe, talent attraction is very important. There's student attraction. There's medical, when you have different bodies promoting a place, bringing people together, making them work together so that they can put out a consistent proposition is also, it sounds very easy, sounds very logical, but it's the work, again, like someone in Sweden said, it takes 200 meetings before you actually start making any sense. 200 meetings maximum. And lots of people in the audience nodded because they said yes. So it's a very difficult iterative process, but it's about cooperation and unified place proposition.
Okay, great. I think Leon has an interesting question too.
Yes, so
Please.
we were addressing Europe in the previous question. Now let's dive into Latin America with its own realities and population, etc., and geography. So the question would be, for Latin American destinations looking to utilize place branding, what strategies would you recommend to prioritize to achieve significant impact?
This is a very generous question on your part, because it assumes some knowledge. I will not purport to have knowledge of your lovely, wonderful, diverse continent. So if I may just see, and I know there's a lot of work and interesting work being done in Colombia as well, and elsewhere. So if I may I just cheekily say what could be the common mistakes, maybe? And,
Yes,
or
yes,
things
please
to
go
look
ahead.
out for. And apart from the usual, checking out for the mediocre as it, good enough, but not striking, this is super tricky, because it's okay. You can have a brave official somewhere, maybe. You can have a brave creative director. You can have a brave strategist who would come up with something interesting. And then it will start going up to the governmental levels to get a sign off. And it's, a death by 100 signatures, a death by 100 approvals, where everybody tries, people don't want to take risks, and officials don't want to take risks. So avoiding this little corrections that would result in something that pleases everybody but nobody can remember is a genuine challenge. So like I say, it's not because people are not clever enough or creative enough, it's managing the process and playing the game of the process. And I think, and another one which came up, I saw I can't comment because it's not our work, and it would be, but there was a country message and it had a contradiction in terms of values, because it said, it was something like, we've got the beach, but we're also super innovative. And maybe it's true, but it's not one thing, it's two things. And then you can't create one image. It has to be one that explains everything. What else? Sorry, I just lost my thought. And also, yes, But sometimes when people describe values or character, they would put, again, we're caring, we're nice people, we're very caring, and then say we are very daring and very brave. And usually, if you try to imagine it as a person, the person who is caring is usually a different archetype for the one who's very brave and adventurous and reckless. So I think if you try and put, when you have a proposition, when you say, okay, this is what we are saying about us, try to imagine it as a person and see whether a person like this would actually be plausible, or is it a Frankenstein with bits but belonging to different parts? So that would be my cheeky answer to your question.
Thank you so much.
So I think Juanjo has another question, very interesting for the group. Please. No, you are in mute.
Sorry. Now. Could you share, please, a case of place branding project that you consider a role model for other destinations, perhaps a successful case in the UK?
Thank you. I think there were a number of, if you talk about UK, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, everybody was talking about Nottingham. But I think today in Britain, the most interesting brand is Sheffield. And it's an industrial city, northern, doesn't have your sunshine, doesn't have your typical creative appeal, but they have an interesting guy who is, there's no promoter, it's genuinely professional respect, Mark Mobbs, who I think has got a philosophy degree, so it's not your typical marketer, who approach things originally, and they have been working very hard to position themselves as a creative city, and they are succeeding. They particularly not just creative in terms of arts, and although they do fascinating 3D projections on the roofs, so there's enough of weird, interesting stuff if you want to, but even they developed their food proposition. So you could go to Sheffield now as a foodie and have a good time. So quality, but innovation. So I think they're doing it very well. And I think at the moment, this is the most looked up to brand in the UK. But I think globally, I'm a very big fan of the work that is done in Tasmania, which is an island in south of Australia. South for Australia means colder. Very bad reputation, sort of nothing previously, not bad, but in terms of nothing interesting, very backward story. And they also approached the task very anthropologically, and they said, let's figure out what is our story, what holds us together. And Todd Babiak, who is also a writer, so again, not your typical background, came up with an absolutely genius line of quiet pursuit of extraordinary, which explains, again, they're introverts there in Tasmania. They're introverts. They're not interested in result. They're interested in the process. They want everything to be done well. So Sheffield Tasmanian is different. They're very distinct sort of black and white graphics. But this quiet pursuit explains, again, everything that happens in Tasmania. And they have been phenomenally successful. They've been doing it for 5 years now. And, talking of KPIs, everybody worries about KPIs. How do we prove the success of our project? And I think here's a good demonstration. House prices in Tasmania are going nuts. They're going upwards. There's more jobs. The businesses are booming. And I think if you want to prove success of your place branding project, you don't look at the number of clicks because they can be meaningless, but you look broader. and you look at the quality of life, you look at, applications for work visas, you look at net migration, a bigger socioeconomic picture. And it takes time. Like I said, with Tasmania, it's their 5th year, but the house prices are already rising. So you look at the bigger picture, and then the government again don't have to feel, when they feel they're doing the right thing, and the population also knows they're doing the right thing. And something that we haven't touched yet is that place branding helps create the sense of civic pride and belonging, and just people need to feel good about where they live. And if they genuinely, if it's not a blown up something, but if they genuinely feel this is the best place for me, given my character, given how I see life, and there are people here who share this, I mean, this is an enormous contributor to, peace, happiness, and all of those indicators as well. Sorry, but I've deviated a bit, I think.
No, it's okay. Thank you very much. These are very nice examples, and we saw it here more from the practitioner point of view, how they are now shining a little bit from Europe and from Asia. Tell us a little bit how to do the things different. So I think Leon has a very important question too right now for us. Is a topic that we consider it is main for the practitioners, and we are now like a little concerned about this topic. So Leon, please.
Yes, so thank you very much. So we want to go back to Latin America now, and this is something that is happening as we speak. And there's this big ambitious place branding project led by the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, also known as CAF, C-A-F. And they want to develop a brand for the whole region. I mean, we're talking about more than 650 million people, around 35 countries. And the way they have approached the process is they made like a contest to select 5 finalist teams based on their graphic design portfolios, which are going to travel to Brazil for 1 week, make part of a boot camp, and then at the end of that week, come up with a logo that should represent the region. Apparently, there are no methods or surveys, focus groups, interviews, no real anthropological studies and deep dives in this process. What is your advice on this approach?
First of all, I'm not surprised. I think this approach of let's do it by people themselves or professionals, let's source it from the people, is usually the very first step that many government or well-meaning agencies, governments, or in this case, an agency of a bank do. They think, let's source it from the people. Ideally, let people vote on their favorite version of the logo, and how can you be wrong? The people will say what they want. Look, in general, if somebody gets to think, and so it's interesting that this is at least done with professionals rather than open to the public, because that's how it's also done. And the only value of this approach is to get people thinking about the place. What does it mean to me? How do I express it? I think it puts design agencies in a difficult position, because if they don't want to participate, they're unpatriotic. If they do, the measure is, how do you make sure that what you do resonates? And of course, there can be, again, artists out there who just feel the place, or maybe feel Latin America so well that they would create a product that people would say, yes, this is us. That warms up my heart, that gladdens my heart to see it. But you need to be a real artist. So what usually this process, unfortunately, don't lead anywhere. And wherever we've seen them around the world, they go away quietly, because it's very difficult to judge. What are the criteria? If supposedly you have 5 logos, what do you measure them against? Do you have the brand personality model? Then, if you do, you can compare. So I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but just to put forward my arguments. And then, so there's no criteria, and it leads to, what you call the taste decision. I like it, I don't like it, between the juries. But then, again, they do not get signed off, because sometimes the politicians would be too afraid to put a name under a particular logo or an official, because things get heated up. There will be a discussion. You have 5 agencies, one wins, what, the 4 go away? No, they will try and say why their version is better. And I believe if you have high quality people, you have great creatives in Brazil, there'll be 5 great logos, but what do they mean? And what's the meaning behind them? So unfortunately, it makes life more difficult for us in the place branding field, because the media gets whiff of this. There'll be articles, what are our money being spent on? It's just a picture, my 5-year-old could have drawn this, the usual story. And as a result, other place branding projects will become more difficult to get sign off, because they're our business is done through the public sector. Public sector officials are afraid they're in charge of public money. They don't want to risk their reputation. So they'll be less likely to sign off on any place branding after this, but I obviously wish it every success, because, if it does make people think about the whole idea of let's think of what unites us, generally is good. But we just, I don't want to dismiss it, but I know that it would be a surprise if the result is genuinely successful and genuinely endorsed by people of the continent. That would be great. That would be terrific. Well, but there are other ways of achieving it.
Yeah, we are now in these discussions, around this process, and well, we will see what happens in Brazil, and probably see a nice logo who will be
well, the question is, what will they do for a week? They'll have to be doing some. They'll probably have some exercises. I don't know. They'll have some brainstorm. Yes, you can read Todd Babak has great texts on about brainstorming and how it doesn't lead anywhere. But it's very easy to be cynical. And I don't want to be cynical. But so maybe they will do something interesting in Brazil in that boot camp, and they will, have more love for the continent after that. But
yeah, exactly. We will see. We have a question from the audience. Ana Sousa is a very active person, and we know it well. So say that, thank you, Natasha, lovely presentation. And he asked, can you share some recent books where we can find these examples, Sheffield, Tasmania, and the other ones?
Anna, great question. Very good question. And look, I think there are 2 things. There's place branding practitioners, and there's place branding academics. And they try, some people try to breach this gap, but it usually takes a long time, I think, to get into the book. I don't know if Tasmanian is yet in any book. And so there's a resource called, I'm sure it's City Nation Place, the big professional conference. So I think if you buy they've recently collated, I think, all their finalists over the last 10 years. It's not a perfect book, because it's not edited, and some places hire better copywriters than the others, and some stories are absolutely fascinating, whereas others are difficult to get through. But that gives you a picture. But I feel that our sector needs a newsletter. I very much feel we need somewhere where you can actually learn that, these guys in, this is what New Zealand is doing today. This is what I don't know, something in Alaska started, and I don't think we have such resource yet.
Well, I know that we can, or well, there is a lot of good examples too in the Place Brand Observer
Yes,
website.
yes.
Florian has been doing a very good job gathering a lot of good cases and put together all the practitioners and academics in the world. So I know
Yes,
probably knows
absolutely. We should
the,
do a plug-in for, yes, and Florian does a very good job, very thorough interviews. Um, and yes, what I mean is it would be nice to have something more daily and more
okay.
news-based, I think, as well. But yes, probably Place Brand Observer is the closest.
Yeah, well, and the ITBO organization, and they are gathering to annually and doing some region um, conference too. I think in their webpage they have a lot of good cases too. Of course, they are not like a book. Of course, there's still a lot to do in the academic field. I am very happy with for example, the masters in place branding for the University of in London,
Middlesex, yes,
the middle
Janina
school.
Warren, yes, yes.
Giovanna and Bloom, they are doing a nice exercise to have in just
There's
one
also,
program all the information.
yes, I also think for talent attraction specifically, future place leadership is very good. And another interesting conference, I know it's not books, a conference, is the Nordics Place
Oh yeah,
Branding Conference.
next
And
week.
that's next week in Tallinn. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm going. There's a lot of innovation in place branding and coming from the Nordics, in specifically Finland. I mean, Iceland is also well known for their quirky sense of humor, and but Finland has been particularly has been consistently very interesting and very good at how they come out. And at some point, I remember telling people, if you want to learn place branding, just watch what the Finns are doing.
Great. So now here in Colombia, we are doing a nice exercise with University EAFIT from Medellin. We're putting together a boot camp, the 3 days boot camp, immersive in the city of Medellin. Is in the last days of June, 27, 28, and 29 of June. We're doing it with Guido van Gardener, who is a professor from the London School of Economics and Cambridge, and he used to be a practitioner. Now he's an academic. But so we together are doing this bootcamp in Medellin too. So the people, if somebody is
Bernardo, may I ask?
more about place branding, of course, all invited. So yes, Juan.
May I ask you, Natasha, what's the essence of a place?
Okay,
What's
yeah, the
this?
last question. The essence of a place.
What is for you the essence? For me, it's the architecture, but for
That's because you're an architect.
Yeah, yeah, and probably the food. You know, we know that you like food and gastronomy, not food. Yeah, of course, we like food.
I like food, and I very much like the architecture. My very first job, I wanted to be an architect, but then I realized I don't do physics that well, and architecture tells a lot, absolutely, but for me, it's the people. It's talking to the people.
Yeah.
And meeting people, and it's the biggest privilege. Actually, they sit down, tell you their life stories. They probably won't see you again very often, but they still trust you. And they often say that this work is a bit like therapy, and maybe it is, because the outcome is that people always feel better about where they live, or feel better about themselves. And for me, the main magic is meeting the people.
Okay, but yeah, talking about this, just to finish, and and exploring a little bit about the topic that I saw you in London talking about the gastronomy and places. Can you explain a little bit how the the food and the products, the origin products are helping to conceive a place, or helps to to know a destination better?
There are, I think there's a very clear link. And we originally started working with gastronomy on request of a client. So there was a region that was the archetype of innocent, nice, clear, how childhood is. The trees are big, you could look at the dewdrops. And they said, yes, but how can we express it better? Because they didn't have great architecture. And they didn't have great anything, to be honest, apart from this wonderful land. And their food, whatever grew there, was immensely tasty. So we worked with local chefs and professional chefs from elsewhere to try and move this idea of purity and happiness, simple happiness, into creating modern dishes. So again, the holy grail, traditional with a modern twist, reinterpretation. And you can do this, and you can. It was very well taken up both by the local chefs. We did a cookbook that, without any promotion, I think is now in the third print because people buy it as souvenirs, and so. And again, it's something very gratifying because people learn about themselves and improve the quality of life. Same thing in Sheffield. I think Sheffield, like I said, their food is not about goodness. Their food is about innovation and being interesting and something you've never tried before. So I think food is a very good medium to express your place values. In South Australia, food is about A, great quality because of commitment, and B, about sharing. Nobody eats alone. And not just alone, nobody eats in twos. You go to a restaurant, there, tables for 10, tables for 12. That's how they eat. That's how they go out. So again, just in that specific place. So I think if you watch how people eat and what they eat, that also leads you to place identity and vice versa.
Okay, nice. I think I wanted to know, just to ask Leon, who has a good experience working with origin products. So tell us a little bit more about your experience with Jordan and with Vietnam, please.
Okay, so I've worked a lot with origin-based products. So this is a type of place branding, although not based on destination, but on origin. So it depends on the project in each particular case. For example, we did quinoa of Bolivia as a national brand, promoting the quinoa producers, and the heart of the whole project and the value proposition was based on the Aymara people, this indigenous culture that basically have been growing quinoa for more than 2,000 years. We went to Vietnam, and then it was about the product, as well as in Jordan with the Jordanian olive oil project. We found out, for example, after a lot of investigation, that the genetic origin of olives grown in the southern part of Europe, the big producing countries of olive oil like Spain, Greece, Italy, the genetic origin comes from the land which now makes part of Jordan. So it was not basically a product, a brand, as based on people, but on the product itself. So here you have two cases. Quinoa in Bolivia is based on people, and the national brand for Jordan to promote olive oil is based on the product per se. So of course each case is different, but there's a whole array of options, and only through very good research and immersion into the culture, into the history, into the people, into the territory, you can find the answers to get a grip on a solution for place branding.
Yes, and you need to put it as a nice story.
Exactly.
We haven't talked about the story and the importance of a good story.
Yes.
Oh, okay, and other question for the group. I know Juan Fernando is part of the Gastronomy Association of Colombia. Uh, can you tell us a little bit more how the academic, the association is doing uh, some promotion of the Colombian food, or how they work to get more about the essence that you said, the essence of Colombia through their food, through our food.
Well, first of all, this is not. You're putting me in a very nice and
Complex situation. I know. Yeah, we are live, but don't worry.
well, the Colombian Academy of Gastronomy preserves the national identity through food. We have
Okay.
Colombia is a very diverse and a very different country because we have almost 128 different types of cultures. So you can imagine how those 128 cultures prepare the same potato.
Or arepa.
And then we decided that we have several common foods, but when you are eating it in a sea level or at the 3,000 meters over the sea level, things just change dramatically. And those things really create our identity. And people can fight for the flavor of the same potato in different ways. Here we have people from La Costa. Leon is from Cartagena. When you eat the meat in Cartagena, the flavor is completely different from the meat that we eat here in Bogota. But we still, all the academics that works in the academy, they all fight for deserve to be the first or the best one. So our common dialogues are related to how flavor is related to identity and how flavor creates dialogues so people can meet. Because just the way you eat is the way you extend the dialogues between people.
Mm-hmm.
And as you noticed in your speech a few moments ago, we don't need to eat in big tables. We need to eat with our families.
Mm.
And the way people transmit the way they cook is the way that people think. And it's the way they approximate to the cosmology. So, oh my God, Leonardo, that's a very tough question because it can go in many polygons of understanding. We are not nowadays saying that Colombia has departments or or small towns. We are now creating routes. How the cacao roots integrate our country, how the coffee roots integrate it, how the vegetables. We have tons of different kinds of vegetables that are only eaten in certain places of Colombia, and many people are trying to understand that we just have physical barriers, and we don't have, but we in flavors we are just one.
Thank you very much, Juan. We know that there is a large topic. Yes, Natasha.
Yes, Leonardo, could you organize another seminar on this, just for this, please?
Yeah, just for food sharing, but we probably do it live, but all together.
Food,
We
place
can
identity.
invite you here
But with
and
food.
with us
But
sharing some
but
good
let's
Colombian
but
food.
let's talk and more food on the table so we can discuss what we taste.
Yes.
And
Yes. Well, thank you, Natasha. Ladies and gentlemen, as we wrap up today's insightful session, I want to express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Natasha Grand Norman for her invaluable contribution and profound insights. It has been a privilege to delve deep into nuances of place branding with such a esteemed expert. I also extend my gratitude to my fellow place branders, Juan, Fernando Rubio, thank you very much, Leon Trujillo, and Juan Jose Posada for their engagement question and rich discussion that undoubtedly enrich our understanding of crafting compelling place identities. Thank you to you all who join us today. We hope that these perspectives and strategies shared have inspired you and will prove useful in your efforts to shape the identities of place in meaningful and sustainable ways. Please keep an eye on our coming events for our discussion like this one. Go to placebranders.com and learn more about us. Until next time, keep exploring the stories and values that make each place unique. Thank you once again and have a wonderful day.
Thanks
Bye.
a lot. Thanks to Mrs. Natasha. We love this conversation today.
I really enjoyed it. It's lovely meeting you all and having this talk, because we all know what we're talking about. We have so much to say. You have so much experience. I'd love to know more about your backgrounds and what you do. And yes, so if there's Leonardo, if there's any way of keeping us together or continuing conversation somehow, I'd love to stay in touch.
Yeah,
Thank
definitely.
you.
And thank you again. And thank you all for being with us. For the next time. See you next time.
Bye bye. Ciao.
Bye bye.